What's up, YouTube? So, back again for another video, and me talking about the best controller, my top 10 best controllers of all time. Now, this list is arguable, and if you have a controller that you prefer over all of these, let me know in the comment section. But without further ado, let's get on to the top 10 controllers of all time. So, the first is actually going to be the NES controller. Now, why NES controller? They are solid. They had all I had was a D-pad and A and B, but it was by far the most solid controller that has came out. You probably won't ever find an NES controller that has been destroyed. Now, I know that this is kind of on the aspect of being really solid controller on outside of performance, but we can look past that due to the fact that it's so low on the list, and me not saying that this is one of the best controllers would be a shame, so that's why it's number 10. At number 9, I'm actually going to go off and say by far the only PlayStation controller that's going to be on this list is the PS3 at number 9, namely the DualShock 3. This is by far one of the best controllers that PlayStation has ever released, being Bluetooth, having a relatively good D-pad like on all of their controllers, but it was released on one of the best consoles, and honestly, I never had a problem with the DualShock 3s. I had a problem with the dual axes or 6-axis, and I've even had issues with PS4 controllers being really flimsy and not as responsive as I need them. I'll get into why I don't like the PS4 here in a later video. At number 8, the Nintendo Switch Pro controller. Now, this one is in a weird spot on the list because the next few controllers all perform about the same in my opinion, and they all have some relevance. So, with number 7 being the Pro controller, why? Well, the Nintendo Switch Pro controller is one of by far the most solid Nintendo controllers we've gotten so far. It has a ridiculously good battery life, and the fact that it is one of the only controllers out right now that runs a USB Type-C for charging, meaning that it's going to be a lot easier to find a cable replacement for it. And honestly, it's such a simplistic design, and it's honestly one of the most comfortable controllers I've felt because it's about the size of an Xbox One. Now, at number 6, we have the wireless enhanced controller for the Switch. I love this controller. It's got 2 programmable buttons on the back, and honestly, it is one of the best controllers that I've gotten a chance to get my hands on. Honestly, I wish I had a Pro controller to show you guys, but with my experiences with the Pro controller, I do have enough knowledge to say that the wireless enhanced is my preference, but I am willing to use both because they are basically the same controller, just one has a better D-pad. That is the only difference. That's the only thing that puts this up on it. On top of that, this one takes batteries, so you could technically argue and say that the Pro controller is better than the other one. That's why this spot's so controversial. It could be any of these. And finally, at number 5, topping off the controllers that I didn't really have a spot for, but they all are kind of about the same, is the Xbox 360 controller. Specifically, the original 360 controller. And I'll get to why. So these controllers had a relatively good control scheme and weren't really that heavy, but you could feel the quality that was put into the work. Now, would I say that this is one of the best controllers ever? Yes, because honestly, it's one of the most solid controllers ever, and I've destroyed one of these on my channel. Moving on to number 4, the Xbox 360 revised controller. Now, why am I saying revised here? Well, between the original 360 and the re-release, there was a D-pad that you were able to curl the D-pad on newer ones, and honestly, I'm pretty sure they got better battery life. Moving on to number 3 is the Wii U Pro controller. Why is this sitting at such a high spot on the list? Well, because it basically almost never died as long as you charged it when you were done. And that's the sad thing, because you could be playing for 24 hours and still not kill the battery and the controller. So really, it was a win-win. Now, as it goes for the layout, it's actually got a pretty unique layout that actually works for people like me. You see, I don't really play a lot of games outside of the majority of fighting games, so having a D-pad next parallel with the button controls, or your fighting controls, is actually pretty helpful for me. Speaking of which, at number 3, and this is really high up on the list, but I'm going to say the Xbox One controller. This thing is so good. If you have not used an Xbox One controller yet, I recommend it because it's really one of the only versatile controllers out right now. Whereas it works on Xbox One, PC, it works on your mobile devices, tablets, etc. It's really, really just a universal controller, and even a universal design. Actually, a lot of third-party controllers for PlayStation and Xbox, or PlayStation and Switch, take this aesthetic of the controller because it is a better controller. Taking my number 2 spot is not a Sony product, but actually a Razer product, the Razer PS4 controller. Now, I know I said I wasn't going to have any other PlayStation controllers on here, but just hear me out. Like I just said, a lot of third parties started making Xbox-style controllers for PS4 and the Nintendo Switch. And this is very apparent with Razer's release of the controller for the PS4. And honestly, I would use this over any PS4 controller because it is inherently better, and it is honestly better for me. And then finally, my number 1, and honestly, if you argue this, just try the controller yourself and you may actually like it. The Pro Xbox One controller. Now, this controller is extremely good. Now, the reason I'm not including SCUF on this list is because we all know how good SCUF controllers are. are. If you are a gamer, you know how good a SCUF controller is. And the Xbox One Pro controller does a really good job of being a lower end SCUF controller. And honestly, the only reason SCUF's not on this list is because if SCUF was on this list, every SCUF controller would take spots 1 through whatever, because they are definitely better. Now, I'm going to honorably mention the GameCube controller, because in all honesty, that is one of the most iconic controllers for the GameCube, for any console really, because it's one of the only controllers that is actually used on multiple consoles. It was used during the Wii era, it was used during the Wii U era, and now it's being used during the Switch as well. So there really is no excuse for me not to honorably mention it. I just know that the GameCube controller has a lot of problems with the fact that there are analog triggers, because at this point in time, analog is all but forgotten. You want to have digital triggers because they are quicker to respond. And honestly, with the fact that the Nintendo Switch has a GameCube PDP GameCube controller, it can still fit into this category of really good controllers. I want to thank you guys so much for watching, and peace out.